In the history of murders and mysteries in Germany, the Hinterkaifeck case has to be the most perturbing one, not only because of its terrible nature, but the events that elapsed before and after the murder, is what makes it worth of shivering thoughts. Hinterkaifeck was a small farmstead situated outside the village of Kaifeck, close to Ingolstadt city, in Germany. In this farm lived the marriage consisting of Andreas Gruber of 73 years, his wife Casilia of 72, the widow daughter Victoria of 35 and the children of the latter, Casilia and Joseph of 7 and 2 respectively. The Grubers were not entirely popular, not only for Andreas' reclusive self, but because it was rumored that little Joseph was the son of an incestuous relationship between Andreas and Victoria. Before the crimes, strange events began to occur on the farm. In October of 1921, the Grubers' previous maid suddenly quit her job, claiming to hear strange noises in the attic and outside the house. She was sure that the house was haunted and that the dead was near. It would take the Grubers until the end of March of 1922 to find a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, but, to her infortune, her arrival was only hours before her murder. After her left, the strange events didn't stop. Mrs. Gruber also began to hear sounds in the attic. Despite repeated searches by Andreas, nothing unusual was found. But the weirdest event occurred, only 1 week before the murders. Andreas told a neighbor, the appearance of strange footprints in the snow that covered the farm. These tracks, beginning at the gate of it, came to the door of the house, and then returned to the forest surrounding the farm. However, the traces were initiated suddenly in the snow as if it had appeared there. Soon after, he also began to hear the sound of footsteps in the attic. A set of keys went missing and a newspaper, not one subscribed to by the Grubers, was found nearby. Friday, March 31st, was the last time anyone saw any of the Gruber family. On Tuesday, April 4th, a neighbor of the Gruber came up to visit the farm since it seemed unusual to take so many days without seeing any of them, plus, young Casilia had 2 days without going to school. What he found was the horror itself. Inside the barn were the lifeless bodies of 4 members of the family, untidy, covered with chunks of hay. He rushed inside the house in search of the missing youngest member of the family, only to find a similar picture. Joseph was also dead, resting lifeless inside his cradle right next to the maid that shared the same end. All were killed with a pickaxe. According to the reconstruction made by the police, the crime took place as follows. The murderer or murderers were in the barn on Friday night, and somehow were attracting or bringing in members of the family to him, killing them one by one, first Andreas, then his wife, then his daughter Victoria, and lastly to the small Casilia. All died instantly except for the little girl, Casilia. She could witness the whole macabre scene, plus they pulled off several strands of her hair, so there is the possibility of resistance on her part. After this, they entered the house and killed the maid and the child while sleeping, dying on the spot. The dimensions of the crime made a research team came from Munich. The autopsies placed the date of death to be March 31st. This seemed impossible since further investigation showed that after the crime, the murderers did not flee, since the interrogation to the neighbors showed that, during the Saturday and Sunday, smoke kept coming from the chimney, as well as remnants of recently eaten meals were found in the kitchen, proof that the house was not empty. Rarer still, the animals had been fed for the weekend, third proof that someone had stayed during those 2 days. On Monday, the house remained empty. The first mobile that shuffle was robbery, which was discarded to the find of money in the house, as well as some jewelry. Police also interrogated more than 100 suspects, but there was no evidence against any of them. The only one that was researched for some more time was Schlittenbay Lawrence, a former suitor of Victoria, which was rejected by her father. Schlittenbay acknowledged that he hated Andreas and was convinced that he was the father of Joseph, but with his death he did not win anything. Nothing was found against him beyond the possible mobile, so he was left free. The autopsy showed that all had died from head trauma by a blunt object, a peak, and died on the spot, except for the girl, Casilia, who lived the agony for several hours. The heads were preserved in Munich until losing them during World War II, while the bodies were buried in the cemetery of Hofen. The case to date is still open, although it has reached the conclusion that is, and will be,